I was the guy rolling his suitcase into a Cleveland airport at dawn, ticket paid, seat assigned, when my boarding pass turned into a red X. The gate agent's smile collapsed, then came back stitched and polite. She tilted her head toward the screen like maybe I'd read a different truth there than she did. My name was right. The seat was right, the companion wasn't. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Sir, it shows your companion is Tyler, she said, tapping the glass with a chewed fingernail. Not Emma. I felt the floor shift. It was Saturday, May 24th, 2025, 5:58 a.m., Cleveland, Hopkins. I could smell burnt coffee from the kiosk and the jet fuel coming through the door seals. Our plan, my plan, was simple. First trip without my wife. A week in Fort Lauderdale with my daughter to walk the pier and talk about the parts of grief we'd both been skipping. I'd paid $4,312 ATT to Sunbreak Travel on May 3rd, used 62,000 of my airline miles, and set Emma as my companion. I even tucked a photo of her mother into the side pocket of my carry-on, the one taken in '06 on the Detroit Riverwalk, wind in her hair, eyes telling both of us to keep going. The agent called a supervisor. They whispered, typed, frowned. I stepped aside as passengers flowed around me like a river splitting around a rock. Overhead, the gate speakers chimed. Final boarding. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Don't freak out. I needed this. We'll talk when I'm back. Another ping. A photo of palm trees through a plane window, 2 plastic champagne flutes touching at the rims, a shadowed jawline on the left edge. Not mine. My mouth went dry. I pulled up the airline app, thumb stumbling over the login. There it was, companion updated, May 12th, 11:42 p.m. The name had been swapped from Emma to Tyler Barnes. I didn't authorize it. I didn't even know you could do that without the payer. The supervisor came back with an apology a shade too smooth. I'm sorry, sir. There's nothing I can do once the flight is boarded. You can rebook. He offered a paper I didn't take. I stood there holding a ticket to a conversation that wasn't going to happen, listening to the ding of the jetway door sealing shut. I slid my airport parking receipt, the gate printed 5:58 a.m. in black thermal ink, into my wallet, and felt the anger bloom late and hot. The truth settled in with the weight of a bowling ball. My daughter had used my money and my miles to take her boyfriend on a vacation that was supposed to put us back together. I drove home with the carry-on thumping in the trunk at every light. The house on West 117th felt wrong when I opened the door. Too quiet, as if it had exhaled while I was gone. The oven timer dinged at 12:03 p.m., the lasagna I prepped for our first night there. I didn't eat. I set the aluminum pan on a cold burner and watched the cheese congeal while I cleared a space at the kitchen table. I laid out what I had like evidence at a kitchen court. The chase statement with the 4,312 ATT to Sunbreak. The 62,000 miles deduction in my email, the May 12th companion swap, the 5:58 miss parking receipt. Emma's text, it's just miles, Dad, relax, from May 14th, 9:07 a.m. I wrote each item on a yellow legal pad, underlined the dates, and circled the word that kept humming in my ears, mine. By late afternoon, the anger cooled into something steadier. I wasn't going to scream, I wasn't going to break anything. I opened a fresh manila folder and wrote a title in block letters I could read from the end of the table. Trip Evidence. Then I took a breath and did the most important thing I've learned since my wife died. I made coffee, sat down, and started a plan. It's just miles, Dad, relax. That text was dated May 14th at 9:07 a.m., 10 days before the airport, but I kept rereading it like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing. I sat at the kitchen table with the phone glowing in my palm and the sound of the refrigerator ticking behind me. The house still smelled faintly of my wife's lavender detergent, though she's been gone 2 years this July. I used to think grief faded in stages, like photos left in the sun. Turns out betrayal develops in reverse. It brings all the colors back, darker than before. I replayed the last few weeks like a slow-motion replay in court. May 3. The travel charge hits my Chase account, 4312.88, listed as Sunbreak Travel. May 12th, the companion name change at 11:42 p.m. May 14th, that smug little relax text. Every date had an echo now, a place where trust went to die. I pulled the lasagna from the fridge, unwrapped it, and shoved it into the trash. That was supposed to be our first meal in Florida. By the window, 2 chairs, 1 photo of Mom between us. I should have been walking along a boardwalk, not staring at oven foil that reflected a man too tired to yell. I called her once that night, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't trust my voice not to shake. So I did what I do when I can't sleep. I cleaned. I wiped every counter, dusted the baseboards, straightened the stack of unpaid bills. But this time I started stacking something else, proof. I slid the airport parking receipt into the folder, underlined 5:58 a.m. with my ballpoint pen, and wrote beside it, attempted travel, denied boarding. The pen bled a dot of ink like a heartbeat. I closed the folder and sat in silence, the kind of silence that hums until you realize it's just your own pulse. When Emma's mother died, she was 23 and angry at everything, especially me. I gave her space, maybe too much. I thought if I stopped controlling things, she'd come back when she was ready. That was my first mistake, because what she came back for wasn't me. It was my open wallet. I drove by her apartment the next morning. Tyler's black Jeep sat crooked in the gravel lot, back window stuffed with beach towels and a Target bag that said vacay mode. I sat there in my pickup, engine idling, watching the curtain shift. For a second, I thought she'd look out and see me, realize what she'd done. But the blinds stayed still. I went home and poured a drink I didn't need. I'm not a drinker. My wife used to tease me for nursing 1 beer through an entire ball game. But whiskey felt appropriate, burn for burn. The bottle said, Makers 46, $49.99 plus tax. I know because I checked the receipt later and added it to the folder. Maybe not as evidence, but as memory. The price of collapse. Around 2 a.m. the phone buzzed again. Another text. You'd do the same thing if you were my age. Don't make this a big deal. It wasn't just a trip anymore. It was contempt, the kind you can't buy back. That night, I scrolled through my old photo roll until I found one from Emma's 10th birthday. The 2 of us covered in chocolate frosting, laughing at something the dog did. I took a screenshot of that photo and added it to my folder too. Not for court, for perspective. When dawn finally bled through the blinds, the legal pad beside me was full, dates, times, line items. The folder was heavier now. Evidence isn't just for lawyers. Sometimes it's for fathers who need to remember the truth when love tries to rewrite it. At 8:21 a.m. on May 25th, I called my sister, Nora. She picked up on the second ring, voice still sleepy. It's early. You okay? I told her everything. The charge, the swap, the photo. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said quietly, You're entitled to your money back and your dignity. We'll do it by the book. Her calm steadied me. Nora used to be a paralegal. She speaks the language of documentation like it's faith. Start a paper trail, she said. Don't confront her yet. Get your facts straight first, so I did. I printed the airline email showing the miles deduction. I downloaded my Chase statement. I even took a screenshot of the companion updated timestamp, May 12th, 11:42 p.m., and circled it in red. Every mark on that page was one step closer to reclaiming my self-respect. By the time I hung up, I'd decided something simple. I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't beg, and I wouldn't chase. I'd build my case the same way I built my life, patiently, brick by brick. Grief had taught me how to survive the absence of someone I loved. Now I was about to learn how to survive the presence of someone who didn't love me back. The folder sat closed in front of me, but I knew what came next. It wasn't punishment. It was proof. And by the time Emma's plane touched back down in Cleveland, I'd be ready for her. I met Pete at sunset. Diner 3 blocks from my place on May 26th. He used to work airline gates before retirement, the kind of guy who knew which rules were written in ink and which ones were just printed too lightly. He ordered black coffee and a side of truth. "So," he said, "she swapped a companion ticket you paid for. Without your consent?" "Exactly," I said, sliding him the printout from my airline app. He whistled low. "Corporate security likes paper. The right kind of paper." That was when my revenge stopped being emotional and started being procedural. Took out the yellow pad from my briefcase, a habit from my building, Inspector Days, and wrote a heading across the top, Case, Unauthorized Companion Change. Pete told me what to do, step by step. If the payor and traveler don't match, they can reverse perks and open a fraud file. But you gotta document everything. He was right. The folder was already thick. May 3rd, 4,312.88. Sunbreak travel charge. May 12th, 11:42 p.m. companion swap. May 24th, 5:58 a.m. Parking receipt, screenshots, texts, photo from the plane. "Don't shout," Pete said. "Just write, be boring." Bureaucracy hates emotion. That line stuck with me. Bureaucracy hates emotion. Maybe that's why it's so good at justice. After the diner, I drove to Nora's house. She had a spare printer that still used actual toner instead of those overpriced ink cartridges. She handed me a cup of tea and said, "Let's make this clean." We drafted a calm, factual email under my name to the airline's corporate security department, attaching everything. "No drama," she said. "Just the receipts, the date, and your boarding denial." At the end, she added one line that sounded like her. "I'm requesting review under unauthorized companion use. I have not granted consent to this substitution and would appreciate resolution or refund." I reread it and nodded. It was simple, sharp, lawful. Before sending, I called Mr. Alvarez, my family attorney. He'd handled my wife's estate after her passing. A patient man who believed in teaching, not just billing. When I told him what happened, he didn't sigh or gasp. He just asked, "Do you want punishment or protection?" I hesitated. "Protection." "Good," he said, "because punishment is quick. Protection lasts." He outlined how a revocable trust amendment could work, not cutting Emma off entirely, but setting conditions, restitution, counseling, proof of stability. This isn't revenge, Thomas. It's boundaries. If she violates them again, the trust executes differently. It sounded cold, but it also sounded fair. The idea of building structure instead of shouting gave me something to hold on to. At 6:15 p.m., Nora hit send on the email to the airline. Subject line, "Request for review. Unauthorized companion change attachments, chase statement, itinerary, parking receipt, screenshots." When the message whooshed away, I felt my pulse slow for the first time since the gate. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the folder open and wrote on a fresh page, "Objective, get my miles back, get my dignity back, and make sure it never happens again." On May 27th, Alvarez's office confirmed a June 10th appointment for the trust update. He'd have the documents ready. I printed that email too and added it to the file. Pete called that evening. "You should also know," he said, "when corporate security reverses miles, they often revoke the companion's status. It's quiet, but it stings." "That's fine," I said. "Let the sting teach." I slept better that night. Not long, but better. The next morning, I made a checklist on a yellow sticky note and taped it to my fridge. Corporate security, follow-up trust, notarization lock, rekeying counseling options, just in case she agrees later. I stared at that last one for a while. It reminded me this wasn't about winning. It was about resetting. By May 29th, the reply came. Subject, case opened, reference 740921. The email thanked me for the documentation and confirmed they'd begin internal review. Attached was a short note. "We've validated your payment and confirmed the ticket was modified using a different device ID. We'll recredit 62,000 miles within 48 hours and investigate further." I printed it, stapled it to my pad, and took a long walk around Edgewater Park. The lake was grey that day, but steady, Like me, sometimes justice doesn't roar. It rustles in paperwork and signatures. When I got back, Nora had texted, "Good. Quiet revenge is still revenge." I smiled, poured another cup of coffee, and looked at the June 10th notary card sitting on the counter. A plan was no longer an idea. It was a calendar, and with every date circled in red, I was one step closer to turning betrayal into proof, and proof into peace. There's a strange calm that comes after you've already lost the thing you feared losing most. For me, it was trust. Once that was gone, everything else became logistics. On May 28th, 9:02 a.m., I sat at my desk, mug of black coffee beside me, folder open like a war map. I dialed the number Pete had scribbled on a napkin. Corporate Security, Customer Protection Division. A soft-voiced rep answered, "This call may be recorded for training." "Good," I said. "You can use mine as the example." I read everything from my yellow pad, calm, deliberate, factual. "I paid for this trip on May 3rd, $43.12.80 charged to my card. I redeemed 62,000 of my own miles. The companion was listed as my daughter, Emma Collins. On May 12th, the companion name was changed to Tyler Barnes, without my consent. I attempted travel on May 24th, as my parking receipt shows. The rep typed quietly for a while, then said, "We'll open an internal review. Please forward all supporting documents." I already did. Sent on May 26th, silence, then a small, impressed exhale. "You're thorough, Mr. Collins. You have no idea. By the time I hung up, I had a case number, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the follow-up email that landed 1 hour later. We've confirmed the transaction originated from your account and payment card. The ticket was modified from a separate IP address, device ID, and login. 62,000 miles will be restored within 48 hours. We appreciate your patience. I printed it twice, one for the folder, one for Nora. When I dropped by her house that afternoon, she met me at the door with a smirk. That was quick. Just as usually is when you've got the paperwork. She read the printout, nodded, and slid it into a clear sleeve. "You know what this is?" she said in proof of pattern. "If she did it once, she'll do it again unless you put rails up." Rails, boundaries, whatever you called them, I was finally building some. That night, I forwarded the same documentation to Sunbreak Travel. I wrote, "To whom it may concern, this charge was authorized for myself and my daughter, not for a third-party traveler. Attached are my receipts and evidence of denial of boarding. Please process refund for unused portion accordingly." I didn't expect much. Travel agencies love loopholes more than justice. But it wasn't about winning every dollar back. It was about making a paper trail so solid that even Emma couldn't twist it into something else. By May 30th, the airline recredited my miles. A short note confirmed it. "Miles have been restored. Further action pending." That same day, Tyler posted a photo online, champagne glasses clinking midair over turquoise water. The caption read, "Free upgrades hit different." I took a screenshot and filed it under a new section in my folder, Exhibits, Irony. Around June 1st, Alvarez called to confirm my June 10th notary appointment for the trust update. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Absolutely. She's still my daughter. But I'm not financing her lessons in entitlement." He chuckled softly. "Boundaries make love durable, Thomas. Without them, it rots." That same day, I called the locksmith. "Repay everything," I told him. "Front door, back door, garage keypad." He came by June 2nd, a Monday morning that smelled of fresh rain and new starts. I paid him $184.50 cash and asked for 2 copies of each key. One went in my drawer, the other to Nora. When the last screw turned, I felt the click not just in the lock but somewhere in my chest. I had turned a boundary physical. At 7:42 p.m. that evening, my phone lit up. It was Emma. The text was short. "Dad, what's with the locks?" I stared at it for a minute, then replied, "We'll talk tomorrow at 6 in person." Her answer came fast. "Fine." I set my phone face down, brewed tea, and looked around my kitchen. Everything in that room had a receipt attached to it. The kettle, $39,999 from Target. The blinds, $64.30 from Home Depot. Even the mug in my hand, free from a city inspector's conference. Maybe that's why I like receipts. They proved something was real, and this moment was real. No shouting, no slamming doors. Just a father finally done pretending that love means letting yourself be used. I sat at the table, flipping through the folder one last time before the storm. The evidence glowed under lamplight, miles restored, trust appointment scheduled, locks rekeyed. Tomorrow, she'd walk through that door, and for the first time in her adult life, she'd find a man who wasn't begging to be understood, just one who was done being betrayed. The front door key spun, then stopped with a hollow clink. I was standing in the kitchen when I heard it, the moment Emma realized she no longer had access. June 2nd, 6:04 p.m. The day had been humid, heavy with Ohio thunder waiting to happen. I'd left the window cracked so I could hear the wind, and when the knob rattled again, I felt the shift. "Dad, why'd you change the locks?" she called. I didn't rush to open. I wanted her to feel it, that pause between entitlement and consequence. Then I turned the deadbolt and opened the door. She stepped in wearing sunglasses and the kind of tan you don't get from responsibility. Her suitcase thudded against the entryway tile. "Seriously?" she asked, her voice caught between disbelief and irritation. "You changed the locks on your own daughter?" I pointed to the kitchen table. On it sat the corporate security email confirming the 62,000 miles had been restored, my Chase statement showing the 4,312.88 charge, and a single yellow notepad page with 3 options written in neat pen lines. "Sit down," I said. She dropped her purse but didn't move. "This is crazy." I stayed standing. "You took my money, my miles, and a week of my time. You can call it a misunderstanding. I call it theft." Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "I didn't steal anything. You said those miles were just sitting there." "They were sitting there," I said, "the same way your mother's wedding ring sits in a drawer, because they belong to me." The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. On the counter, the old kitchen clock ticked like a metronome for my anger. I slid the notepad toward her. "These are your choices." She glanced at it. Option 1. Return the full amount within 30 days. Option 2. Enter counseling with me and agree to financial boundaries. Option 3. Refuse, and I'll amend the trust and file in small claims. She looked up, incredulous. "You're blackmailing me?" "No," I said evenly. "I'm protecting myself." Her voice rose. "Mom would never—" I cut her off. "Don't do that. Don't use her as a shield for your mistakes." For a long minute, neither of us spoke. The air conditioner clicked on, humming low. Finally, she said, "I'm leaving. You can keep your stupid miles." She grabbed her purse and turned, but I added quietly, "And the door code. Don't bother trying it." That stopped her. "You're serious?" "I'm done being a sponsor for bad behavior." She hesitated at the threshold, then turned back, eyes bright with something that used to be guilt, but now looked like resentment. "You think this makes you right?" I looked her straight in the eye. "No, it makes me free." She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. "If you don't stop slandering Emma, I'll sue for defamation." "You're embarrassing yourself." I stared at it, took a screenshot, filed it under exhibits, threats, and sent a short reply. "Please address all future messages to my attorney, Mr. Alvarez." Then I turned the phone face down. That night I walked the perimeter of the house. The locks gleamed faintly under the porch light. For the first time in years, I felt like the space was mine again. Quiet, orderly, safe. I brewed chamomile tea, sat by the window, and watched the streetlights flicker on. I thought about my wife, about how she'd handle this. She'd have been gentler, probably, but she'd have agreed with me. She was the one who taught Emma that love without accountability is just indulgence. Around 10:30 p.m., Nora called. "How'd it go?" "As expected," I said. "She'll test you again," Nora warned. "People always do when boundaries are new." "I'm ready. You got the paperwork." "All of it." "Then she can't gaslight you anymore." We hung up. I poured the rest of the tea into the sink, rinsed the cup, and dried it with the same precision I used on my inspection forms. Every motion had purpose now. The next morning, I opened my email and found a response from Sunbreak Travel. We've reviewed your documentation and will issue a partial goodwill refund of $200 to your card within 7 to 10 business days. I smiled. Not for the money, for the principle. Even corporations understood boundaries better than family sometimes. I printed the email and slid it into my folder behind a new label, Resolved Items. As I closed the drawer, thunder rolled outside, shaking the window frames. A storm was coming, literally and otherwise. Emma's betrayal had started with a plane ticket. Mine was about to take off with a paper trail, and by the time July rolled around, everyone, including Tyler, would learn what accountability really costs. The first fireworks stands were going up around town when the next phase of my plan fell into place. June 10th came with sun and the smell of cut grass. That afternoon, I walked into Alvarez and Finch law office in downtown Cleveland with my file folder tucked under my arm like a passport. The secretary knew me by name. "Trust update?" she asked. I nodded. Inside, Mr. Alvarez adjusted his glasses and motioned for me to sit. "You brought everything?" I laid the documents out like puzzle pieces. Corporate securities confirmation restoring the 62,000 miles. Sunbreak. Travel's email promising $200 refund. The Chase statement showing the $4,312 TAT. Charge. The printed screenshot of Tyler's smug beach. Post Alvarez skimmed each page, lips tightening in a small smile. "This isn't revenge," he said. "It's stewardship." He slid a draft across the desk. Revocable Trust Amendment, June 10th, 2025. It was short and sharp. Emma's inheritance would remain, but locked behind 2 gates, full restitution of the $4,312.88 and completion of 6 counseling sessions with documented attendance. Violate either term, and the trust froze for 5 years. I initialed each page, the pen scratching like a verdict. The notary stamped it at 2:37 p.m., the sound crisp and final. Alvarez looked up. "You're sure?" "I'm certain," I said. "If she wants back in my life, she'll walk through the door of accountability first." When I left his office, the city shimmered with heat. I drove straight to Nora's, handed her a copy. "Keep it," I told her. "If anything happens, this stands." She slid it into her filing cabinet with a nod. That evening, Pete called while I was watering the tomato plants. "You might want to check your email," he said, voice almost gleeful. I wiped my hands, opened my inbox. There it was. Corporate security, case closure notice. After review, the flight companion change was deemed unauthorized. All elite benefits accrued by Tyler Barnes have been revoked retroactively. Case closed. I laughed out loud, the sound startling a bird off the fence. Justice didn't need headlines. It could whisper through bureaucratic channels and still sting like truth. Nora came over the next morning with an idea. "You know what's poetic?" she said, setting her mug down. "Delivering that trust amendment at the 4th of July cookout. Independence Day, freedom from codependency." I blinked. "You want to ambush her at a barbecue?" "Not ambush," she said. "Illumination." The more I thought about it, the more it fit. Every year, our family and the neighbors gathered in my backyard for burgers, fireworks, and half-hearted small talk. This year, the stakes would be different. I called Alvarez. "Can a trust amendment be witnessed in public?" "Certainly," he said, "as long as the notary's present and everyone's of sound mind. I'll arrange it." By June 16th, he had drafted a certified demand letter to Emma, a polite legal reminder to settle the outstanding funds within 30 days, with a clause inviting mediation instead of litigation. I sent it by certified mail, tracking number ending in 3472. I knew she received it. The postal alert pinged at June 18th, 11:09 a.m. No reply. Meanwhile, I kept setting the stage, mowed the lawn, strung the patio lights, replaced the old grill igniter. Every detail mattered, not just for show, but for symbolism. I wanted the scene of her first public reckoning to look perfect. Pete stopped by mid-June with his usual blunt humor. "So you're hosting a Declaration of Independence party, huh?" "Something like that," I said. "Except this one's about financial freedom from my own kid." He laughed, clapped my shoulder. "You're doing it right, Tom. Quiet, legal, devastating." Each evening leading up to the 4th, I checked the mailbox, half expecting a letter, an apology, anything. But nothing came, just circulars and a water bill for 83 to 15 that I filed anyway. Habit, proof, order. On July 3rd, one last email arrived from the airline confirming Tyler's privileges were stripped permanently. "He'll find out the next time he tries to board," Pete said, grinning. "They'll flag him for misuse." I didn't gloat, but I won't lie. That knowledge tasted sweet. That night, I sat on the porch as the first neighborhood fireworks cracked in the distance. The trust documents lay on the table beside a sealed envelope labeled, "Emma, read in full." The smell of charcoal drifted from someone's yard, and the cicadas droned in rhythm. For the first time in months, my heart didn't race when I thought of her name. It just steadied. Tomorrow, she'd walk into a celebration she thought was a holiday and find out it was also a hearing, a backyard courtroom. No judge but truth. And while the sparklers hissed and neighbors laughed, I'd give her one last chance to reclaim her seat at the table, not as my dependent, but as my equal. The 4th of July came heavy with heat and the smell of grilling meat. Cleveland skies hung low, blue as glass, and the whole street buzzed with sparklers and kids dragging red wagons. I'd spent the morning arranging the patio, tablecloth ironed, lemonade sweating in a pitcher, flags lined along the fence. Everything looked normal, which was exactly the point. At 6:30 p.m., guests began to filter in. Neighbors with pie tins, my sister Nora balancing deviled eggs like crown jewels, Pete hauling a cooler that looked big enough to fit a body. "Tonight," he joked, "we're not just celebrating independence, we're enforcing it." I smiled, but kept my focus. The trust document sat inside a blue folder beneath the centerpiece, a small American flag stuck in a mason jar. Beneath that folder, the corporate security case closure, the Chase statement, and the notarized amendment Alvarez had prepped and witnessed just weeks earlier. When Emma's car finally pulled into the drive, the noise seemed to drop a notch. 7:04 p.m., she got out slowly, sunglasses on, Tyler beside her in a white polo, and that smug look that makes you want to check your wallet. I walked to greet them. "You made it," she looked uncertain. "Yeah, wouldn't miss it." "Grab a plate," I said. "We'll talk after dinner." For the first half hour, I played the part, grilling burgers, laughing at small jokes, keeping the conversation floating just above the tension. But I could feel Nora's eyes on me across the table, her signal that it was time. When dessert plates clinked and fireworks began crackling faintly beyond the trees, I stood. The cicadas fell silent. "Before dessert," I said, "I have something to read." Pete cut the propane flame. Even the kids sensed something and quieted. I lifted the blue folder. "A few weeks ago," I began, "I went to the airport to board a flight I paid for. The ticket was valid, the seat confirmed, and the companion seat was supposed to belong to my daughter." I glanced at Emma. She stiffened. "Instead, the system told me I was flying with a man named Tyler Barnes." Someone coughed. The air felt electric. I continued calm and steady. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I documented. I opened the folder and held up the first paper, Corporate Securities email. "This is the airline confirming the companion change was unauthorized. My 62,000 miles were restored. Tyler's privileges revoked." Tyler shifted, face flushing. "That's between you and Emma," he muttered. "Actually," I said, "it's between honesty and theft." I set that paper down and held up the second, the Chase statement with the $4,312.88 travel charge. "This is what the trip cost. Every cent came from my retirement account. I paid it, expecting time with my daughter. Instead, I funded a week-long vacation for her and her boyfriend." A murmur rippled through the crowd, pity from some, disbelief from others. Emma finally spoke, voice trembling. "You're humiliating me in front of everyone." I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. I'm clarifying in front of everyone. There's a difference." Nora slid closer and handed me the final document, the trust amendment. "And this," I said, "is the legal boundary that now exists between us. The inheritance remains, but it's conditional. Full restitution of the 4312.88 and 6 counseling sessions." Complete both and nothing changes. Refuse and the trust holds for 5 years. The words landed like distant thunder. Someone's child dropped a sparkler. Its hiss was the only sound. Emma's eyes filled, not with remorse, at least not yet, but shock. "You actually did it," she whispered. "I had to," I said softly. "You don't learn consequences by escaping them." Tyler tried to laugh it off. "This is nuts, man. Who does this to family?" "Someone who values family enough to make it honest again." The notary Alvarez had sent, a woman named Denise, stepped forward with her clipboard. "Mr. Collins, you'll need to sign and date." I scrawled my name, pen steady. The stamp cracked once more. July 4th, 2025. Official Denise turned to Emma. "You may acknowledge receipt here, Ms. Collins." Emma's hand hovered over the pen but didn't move. Her lip quivered. "You could have just talked to me." "I tried," I said. "But you didn't listen until the world did." She pushed the paper back. "I'm done." She grabbed her purse and walked toward the gate, Tyler trailing, muttering something about toxic parents. The crowd parted. The screen door slammed. A few neighbors exchanged awkward looks. Pete broke the silence. "Hell of a fireworks show," he said quietly. I exhaled, a long, slow breath that seemed to take months with it. "Yeah," I said. "Finally legal." Nora poured sweet tea into a glass and slid it my way. "You okay?" "I will be." Out by the fence, the first real fireworks cracked over Lake Erie, red and white bursts lighting up the night. Reflections danced across the papers on the table, my strange, sacred trophies. Emma didn't sign. That was fine. Some lessons need longer runways. When the crowd dispersed and I started stacking chairs, I saw the pen still lying beside the unsigned page. I left it there in case she came back. By 9:45 p.m., only Nora and Pete remained. "You did it clean," Pete said. "No shouting, no swearing. Just the facts. Facts don't lie," I said. "People do." The cicadas came back, buzzing in low harmony with the distant booms of the city's fireworks. I looked up at the sky, streaks of light fanning out and fading, and thought of my wife. She would have liked the symmetry of it all. Freedom declared, accountability restored. When I finally turned off the porch light, the folder stayed on the table, open to the signature page. The paper rustled once in the night breeze, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe that was her answer. Maybe silence was her signature for now. But justice had already signed its part. A courthouse doesn't sound like justice. It sounds like floor polish and bad coffee, voices echoing off marble that's seen too many family feuds. But on July 11th, that's exactly where I found myself. File folder in hand, wedding ring still on my finger, even though my wife's been gone 2 years. The clerk at the window wore reading glasses halfway down her nose. "Filing for small claims?" "Yes, ma'am. $4,312.88. Plus costs." She took the documents, the Chase statement, the corporate security email, the trust amendment for context, and stamped the first page. That thunk of ink against paper was quieter than any argument, but 10 times more final. The hearing was set for July 29th. When I walked back to my truck, the air outside was thick with humidity and irony. All around me, people were fighting traffic, schedules, bosses. Me, I was fighting the person I'd once rocked to sleep. That weekend, I boxed up my wife's photo albums and took them to Nora's house for safekeeping. The living room felt too much like a museum, memories behind glass, nothing to touch. I needed to clear space for what was next. On July 13th, Emma finally texted, "You filed against me, really?" I didn't reply right away. I wanted her to feel the weight of her own words. When I did, it was short. "Yes, you left me no choice. You can still fix it." That night she sent another, "Tyler says you can't win." "It was just a misunderstanding," I typed, then deleted, then finally wrote back, "Then let the court decide." I turned the phone over and went to bed. The following week, Sunbreak Travel processed the refund they'd promised, $200 back into my account. It felt like a receipt for self-respect. I printed the confirmation and filed it under resolved items, then called Alvarez. "She's starting to realize you're not bluffing," he said. "I'm not bluffing," I replied. He laughed softly. I know. That's what makes this so rare. Meanwhile, Emma's silence stretched longer. No apology, no visit, just a digital void. Tyler, though, he couldn't resist. On July 18th at 1:14 a.m., a new text came through. You're ruining her life. Nice parenting. I stared at it for a long time before replying with one line. A ruined lie looks a lot like a saved truth. I never heard from him again. 2 days later, Nora dropped off groceries. She found me in the kitchen, measuring coffee grounds like a man counting evidence. You're holding up? She asked. I'm done holding, I said. Now I'm just waiting, she smiled. Waiting's part of justice. Gives the guilty time to hear their own echoes. By July 22nd, Alvarez called again. We'll be fine, he said. Your case is airtight. Documentation beats denial. Still, I didn't sleep well that week. I kept thinking about Emma as a child, how she used to play lawyer with her mother's scarves, pretending to cross-examine her stuffed animals. I wondered what she'd say now if the judge asked her why she did it. Would she say it was an accident? Desperation? Love twisted into entitlement? On July 24th, I drove past her apartment. Tyler's Jeep was gone. The blinds were open. Her shadow crossed the window twice, maybe pacing. I didn't stop. I didn't honk. Justice doesn't chase. It waits. At 7:42 p.m. that night, another text came in. I messed up, that was all. I looked at it until the screen dimmed, then typed back, I know. Let's fix it the right way. She didn't reply. But she didn't block me either. That was something. On the morning of July 29th, I ironed a clean shirt, packed my folder, and looked in the mirror. My wife used to say, dignity isn't loud, it's thorough. I smiled at that memory, slid the folder under my arm, and left for court. I wasn't going there to win. I was going there to end the conversation with truth, and for the first time since that red X at the airport gate, I felt lighter. The courthouse clock chimed 10 times when I walked through the double doors on July 29th. The hallway smelled of dust, polish and paper, the scent of consequences. I'd been here before, years ago, inspecting safety codes, but never as a man bringing his own blood to court. The clerk directed me to courtroom 3B. Small claims hearings aren't cinematic. There's no jury, no raised voices, just folding chairs, fluorescent lights, and a judge who looks like he's seen every version of disappointment. Emma sat 2 rows ahead, alone. No Tyler this time. Her hair was pulled back tight, like she was trying to control something that didn't want to be contained. When she turned and saw me, her eyes darted away. The bailiff called our names. Thomas Collins versus Emma Collins. I stepped forward, my folder clutched like armor. The judge adjusted his glasses. This is a claim for $4,312.88, correct? Yes, Your Honor. Emma's voice was small. I never meant to steal anything. I thought he didn't care about the miles. I opened the folder, laying out the documents like a story in paper form. Your Honor, I paid the full amount on May 3rd. My daughter changed the companion on May 12th without authorization, flew with someone else, and left me at the gate. Here's my chase statement, my parking receipt, the corporate security email confirming the unauthorized change, and the partial refund notice from Sunbreak Travel. The judge glanced over the papers, nodding slightly. These are well documented. Emma stared down, fiddling with the edge of her sleeve. I made a mistake, she said. I just wanted a break, Tyler said. The judge raised a hand. No need to explain him. You're responsible for your own actions, Ms. Collins. There it was. The truth, finally spoken by someone who wasn't me. After 20 minutes of review, the judge cleared his throat. The court finds for the plaintiff judgment in the amount of $3,512.88, plus court costs. Payable within 30 days. The gavel struck once, not a bang but a whisper. Justice doesn't need to shout. I gathered my papers slowly, making sure each corner aligned. When I looked up, Emma was crying silently. She turned away, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Outside, the air was heavy but bright. Alvarez met me on the steps, nodding. You did it. I didn't want to, I said. But she needed to hear it from someone impartial. He smiled faintly. That's what judges are for. Professional fathers who can say what blood can't. That afternoon, Emma texted. The message came in broken pieces, like her hands shook while typing. I don't know how to fix this. Tyler's gone. Can we talk? I didn't answer right away. I went for a walk instead, down to Lakewood Park, where the lake rolled grey under a tired sky. I sat on a bench facing the water and thought about everything that had led here. The grief, the guilt, the anger, the folder of proof that had somehow replaced the warmth of family. When I finally replied, it was simple. Meet me tomorrow at 4. Lakewood Park bench by the pier, she came. Alone this time. No makeup, no sunglasses. Just a daughter who looked 10 years younger without the defiance. She sat beside me without speaking for a full minute. The gulls cried above us. I paid the first $1,500, she said finally, sliding an envelope onto the bench between us. Cashier's check. I'll pay the rest in 2 months, I nodded. Thank you. I booked counseling, she added. Starts August 6th. Family sessions. For the first time in months, I let myself breathe all the way in. She looked at me, eyes red. I thought you'd disown me. I shook my head. No, I'm teaching you what loyalty costs. We sat there until the sun started melting into the lake. When she stood to leave, she said quietly, You were right, Dad. Justice isn't revenge. It's repair, I smiled. Sometimes they share the same tools. By August 20th, the air in Cleveland had started to cool. Cicadas had quieted, and so had I. The storm had passed, not loudly, but completely. Emma and I were on the slow road back, one counseling session and one boundary at a time. She showed up that afternoon, wearing jeans and carrying 2 coffees. Peace offering, she said with a shy smile. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once laid out the receipts and evidence like a courtroom exhibit. Now it was just 2 mugs steaming between us. She looked around the house as if seeing it differently, like a place she wanted to belong to again. I didn't realize how deep I'd cut you, she said quietly. I shook my head. You didn't just cut me. You cut yourself. You severed trust. But trust can heal if both sides want it, she nodded. I do. I slid a small envelope across the table. This is for you. Inside was a single silver key, newly cut. It's for the guest house, I said. Not the main one. We'll take things slow. She held the key in her palm for a long time. You're giving me another chance? I'm giving both of us one, I said. Boundaries don't mean exile. They mean safety for both of us. We sat there for a while, listening to the wind move through the trees outside. The house no longer felt heavy. It felt awake again. In therapy the next week, a counselor, an older woman named Dr. Keller, had us list 3 words that describe what we wanted most moving forward. Emma said, respect, space, forgiveness. I said, honesty, calm, continuity. Dr. Keller smiled. Seems like you're already building the bridge back. On September 10th, Emma handed me the second payment, $500 in a sealed envelope, and texted a picture of her pay stub from the diner where she'd started working double shifts. I didn't care about the money anymore, not really. Each payment was less about reimbursement and more about responsibility taking form. When she dropped off the final envelope on September 26th, she added a note on the flap. Thank you for not giving up on me that night. I took the file folder, the one labeled trip, evidence, and moved it from the kitchen drawer to the cabinet in my study. I didn't shred it. I didn't burn it. I just put it away like an old photograph that no longer hurts to look at. In October, Emma suggested a small trip, just a weekend drive to Erie, Pennsylvania, to walk the boardwalk and reset the story, as she put it. We paid half each, cash. No miles, no credit cards. Just 2 adults making an even trade. On the drive, she turned down the radio and said, You know, when you filed that case, I hated you. I know, I said. That means it worked. She laughed softly, and it was the first sound of her childhood I'd heard in years. We reached the lake just as the sun was sliding into the horizon. Gulls screamed overhead. The wind carried salt and forgiveness. For the first time, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Justice had done its job, not by punishing her, but by steadying me. As we watched the waves roll in, Emma said, You could have just yelled, you know. I smiled. Yeah, but yelling fades. Paper lasts. By October's first weekend, the lake was cold enough to bite the air, but calm enough to mirror the sky. Emma and I stood on the pier at Erie, jackets zipped, coffee cups steaming in our hands. The gulls circled above like they had front-row seats to something neither of us could fully name. She leaned against the railing, staring out over the water. "You know," she said, "one day I'm going to tell my kids about this summer. About the day Grandpa sued me," I chuckled softly. "Just make sure you tell them why," she smiled. "Because I took what wasn't mine, and you made sure I learned the price. That's part of it," I said. "But really, it's because love doesn't survive without structure, and you can't build structure on deceit." We stayed quiet after that, watching the horizon fade into a pale gold line. I could smell autumn coming, that faint wood smoke scent that always made me think of my wife. When Emma slipped her arm through mine, it wasn't the grip of a child seeking forgiveness. It was the quiet strength of someone who finally understood the value of boundaries. Later, at the cafe near the marina, we split a slice of pie. She laughed when the waitress handed us one fork. "Guess we're sharing again," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "But this time it's voluntary." That night, back in Cleveland, I went into my study and opened the old folder one last time. Inside were the artifacts of a war that didn't need soldiers, just patience, the 4,212 Bet-88 charge, the May 12 timestamp, the parking receipt from 5:58 a.m., the trust amendment, the court judgment, and Emma's final note. I didn't feel bitterness anymore, just balance. I tucked the folder beside our passports in the fireproof box, slid the lid shut, and wrote a small sticky note across the top. "Evidence is love-wearing armor." Then I turned off the lamp. In the weeks that followed, Emma came by most Sundays. Sometimes she brought groceries, sometimes just conversation. The house sounded different again. Not empty, not crowded. Just right. Pete still stopped by from time to time, usually to remind me, "You should frame that court judgment." I'd laugh and tell him, "It's not a trophy." "Pete, it's a reminder." Even Nora softened, saying, "You did what most parents can't. You taught accountability without breaking the bond." Maybe that was true. Or maybe I just got lucky that my daughter found herself before I had to lose her completely. On the last warm Sunday before winter, Emma hugged me before leaving. "You know, Dad," she said, "you didn't lose me that day at the airport." I looked at her. "Waiting. You gave me back to myself," she said, voice soft, steady. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. After she drove off, I stood on the porch, hands in my pockets, watching the leaves fall one by one onto the driveway. The world was still spinning, slower maybe, but in rhythm again. Justice hadn't come with fireworks or shouting. It had come through patience, paper, and proof, and the steady courage to stay human while demanding fairness. I thought back to that day in May, the red X on my boarding pass, the sting of humiliation. If someone told me then that it would lead to peace, I'd have laughed. But sometimes the road to restoration is paved with receipts, not rage. I walked back inside, poured the last of the coffee, and whispered to the empty room, maybe to my wife, maybe just to myself, "You didn't lose me. You gave me away." And for the first time, I knew exactly what that meant.